for how to develop our own incredible potential. So it's got such a reasonable meaning, you know. It's not a question of believing it, like as if belief would help. Somehow we laugh if you say you believed in mathematics. People think you're ridiculous. You can prove mathematics. We don't think of it as belief. Well, as soon as we say belief, it assumes not provable. It assumes beyond normal. It assumes you can't handle it. Somehow you've got to stuff it in, you know. But we know there's no science. Human beings can't. I mean, human beings created it. So we say you believe in, but the crucial point here is to see the difference between believing in something and applying it. If you can believe in maths, it works. But it won't get you far. Even if mummy says, go and buy me 3 oranges, you can't do it because you don't know how to use it. Believing in it is good because it does work. So believing, oh, I believe in karma, what good is that? It's a meaningless concept. It's an utterly meaningless concept. It's presented in the teachings, detailed descriptions of how it works. As far as Buddha is concerned, for example, it's a natural law. No one made it up. He's not a creator. No one created it. He's observed it. And this part takes time to hear. He's observed it. He presents what he's seen. So believing in it is fair enough, but it's not helpful. Believing in botany, what good is that? I believe it works. That's great, but you can't use it if you don't know how to don't know how it works. That's the crucial point here. So the Buddhist one is it's got to be hands-on. It's got to be hands-on. It's got to be working with it, and then using that as your basis for interpreting things, just like you do with maths or botany. It's pretty reasonable. So you can say that Buddhism is definitely a method for how to get happy and stop suffering. Absolutely that. It's almost like a basis. You could also say it's a method of morality, which comes to the same thing. And it's a system of wisdom. It's a system of, it's a philosophical view about how things are. They all come to the same thing. So the key thing, though, like I'm saying, is the mind. So let's just take it from that perspective. Buddha's saying, whatever goes on in our mind, and we know from the second we wake up until the second we go to sleep, the mind doesn't stop. But for most of us, because it's like underneath, isn't it? If there's a football field a mile away from here, and it's full of 50,000 people, we'd hear this roar, wouldn't we? And we know intellectually it's 50,000 individual voices all saying particular words. But you can just hear the roar. It's like our mind. This quiet roar underneath. But there are literally, even the Western psychology says there are thousands of thoughts a second. And they're just constantly there, aren't they? We call this our unconscious. And naturally we assume the unconscious is something mystical. Well, for the Buddha, the job is to unpack and unravel that, to get absolute, utter clarity about the contents of our own mind. And this is why this technique that these Indians invented more than 3,000 years ago is so utterly outrageous. We analyze what it is. The degree of clarity that we can accomplish, according to Buddhism, coming back to this technique, is beyond conception in our culture. It sounds like mystical. So, this mind of ours, we know from the second we wake up, we're immediately on autopilot. We don't have to remember how to get out of bed again and learn it. We don't have to remember to go to the toilet and what to do and pull your dress up and sit and put the toilet seat up. We know all these things. We've programmed ourselves, have we not? We do. So mainly, we can look at it. We're mainly on autopilot. We've programmed ourselves in a million things. Look at us in a day. We're just so on autopilot. So therefore, of course, we're paying attention to the outside world. It's a busy, complicated thing, this outside world. We have to pay attention. That's our expertise. We're geniuses at doing physical things. We're geniuses at driving and walking and making breakfast and going to the toilet, these things. But we therefore don't pay any attention to what's underneath. We don't give any credibility to it. We don't think it's important. We just think it's the way it is. Our trouble is then, it's only when it comes to the surface, it's only when one of those 50,000 voices is louder than all the rest that we'll then pay attention to it. But that's pretty intense already, and it's way too late to now pay attention. When I'm about to kill Paros, I'm full of rage, and then we go, what'll I do when I get angry? Well, it's a bit late. Just like Vesuvius has just exploded. You don't wait to say, what'll I do about it? It's too late. To say, what'll I do about it when it's come to the surface, because we've not paid attention deeper down, is like driving along the freeway at 120 kilometres an hour and your wheels start to fall off. Oh, what'll I do? A bit late, okay? And this is a really powerful point. You know, we have incredible maintenance for our cars, for our houses, for everything. We even have incredible maintenance for our bodies. But not for our mind, not for our thoughts and feelings and emotions, really and truly. And I think the reason is because we think the external world is the source of our feelings and emotions. But we can know our mind is there the whole time. So the whole job of being a Buddhist then, if whatever goes on in our mind, deep, deep, deep down as well, is the source of happiness and suffering, now and in the future, then we had better pay attention to it. And that's what we need to work with and change. That's his simple approach. Intellectually, this is not complicated. It's just the hardest job we'll ever do because we're addicted to taking care of the external. We don't pay attention and don't have, you know, and of course there are 1,000 explanations of why anger, why love, why compassion. But Buddha's got his own particular approach, you know. And he says, finally, which again is so shocking to us, the neuroses, the fears, the stuff that he would call ego, and we'll go into this clearly. He says this is the source of our suffering. The source, the main source of our own suffering, and indeed the source of why we harm others. And that the virtues, the goodness, the kindness, and it sounds kind of cute almost, is the source of our own happiness and joy, and the source of being able to be used to others. The concept is not complicated. The doing of this job, using Buddha's model, is pretty intense. So if what goes on in our mind is the main source, and long term, the Buddha would say, this is where the business of karma comes in, is the source of the future as well, then we better start knowing what the mind is and know the techniques to use to work with it. Because Buddha's outrageous point is that these neuroses, this ego stuff, this is not at the core of our being. This does not finally define who we are. This is kind of shocking because we utterly assume it does. We utterly assume, oh, I'm just depressed. It's just who I am. I'm angry, just who I am. I'm jealous. I'm this. I'm lazy. We assume this is just who we are. And it feels so prevalent sometimes. But the Buddha's view is also that the goodness in us, you know, I'm not trying to sound like Pollyanna, the virtue, the kindness, the forgiveness, the clarity, the intelligence, this is what defines us. This actually is at the core of our being. This is actually the substance of who we are finally. And the job of being the Buddha's job is to accomplish this, the ridding of the rubbish and the growing of the goodness. I mean, it's quite a shocking concept. You know, I mean, just speaking normally, if you want to use a therapist and I go and ask you for methods to get rid of all ego, all fears, all anger, all jealousy, all permanently, you think I'm insane. Really seriously delusional. But this is what Buddha's saying. We don't hear it so bluntly, you know. We hear it in nice Indian, Tibetan religious terms. Oh, la-di-da, we can all achieve nirvana, wow, wow, you know. We don't hear it properly. That's our problem. Because it's religion, remember, isn't it? Okay, so our mind is not physical. It is not the handiwork of a creator or mummy or daddy. And that's a shock to us as well, but we'll go into all this, we'll explain. So the implication of just this is intense. Because if my anger's mine, Paros' punch is his. No argument, he punched me, you all saw it. Let's just say. Equally, why are you happy, Robina? Oh, Paros was so kind to me. Well, you also saw him be generous and look after me. You saw it, it's evident, it's true. But we assume that that's the source of my happiness. And we assume the punch is the main source of my suffering. This goes without saying for us. To even now hear that it isn't is a bit shocking to us. Makes us kind of, you know, my goodness. So we have to analyze this. And this is the essence, this is the basis, the foundation of then, it's the implication of practice. But it's the hardest thing we'll ever do because this idea that here's the source of my happiness and suffering is pretty deeply ingrained. And we're going to go into this. So, okay, if whatever goes on in our mind is you know, plays a role in our life, is the source of happiness and suffering, and if we want to be happy and don't want to suffer, that's the first question to ask. Well, do you want to stop suffering? And even though our definitions of it are different, we all know it refers to the horrible stuff. So, yes, please. Do you want to be happy? Yes, please. These words sound a bit simple, but let's take it from there. Well, then if it's true, according to the Buddha, that what goes on in our mind is the main source, we'd better hear what he has to say. We better hear his recipe. Pretty reasonable. So there's, okay, when you study the Buddhist mind, in the Buddhist texts, you study the mind in depth. There's two ways of presenting the mind. And one is what they call the epistemological model, which is the way mind functions. Now this itself, it's absolutely mind-blowing. The clarity and the subtlety and the way the mind works is unbelievable. And this is coming from the experience of those who have plumbed the depths of their own mind internally. Not from looking with the microscope on a brain. It's internal. This is utterly fascinating. I think scientists will be blissed out to study this model because it's so intricate, so precise, but they've got a positive